Back in the lab.
Back in the lab.
What's the guy's name in Breaking Bad?
Heisenberg, yeah. Back in Heisenberg territory. I ended up having a Costa. Did you? Oh my god. Get out of here. Get out of here. I wasn't proud of myself. Not my best moment.
Oh man.
But I had a flat white.
You know, like I was saying about going to Australia the first time, and that was like my first time being introduced to a variety of things. One of the things was a flat white, and it came in a little glass.
Yeah.
And it was tiny. I was like,
What is that?
Is that like?
Is that it?
But it was like, you know, it was on the money.
Yeah.
And I came back to the UK and like went to like Costa or Starbucks and found the same drink, and like you say, it was like
huge.
It was night and day, and it was like
completely different. Yeah. You know, they're there on an immense scale that is, you know, not even comparable in terms of the amount of coffee they sell and the volumes they get through and the kind of market they have to sell in. Needs to be really almost middle of the road. You know, it just needs to be brown and tastes a bit like coffee.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, like you know, and in a lot of their buying practices from some of these big names is actually really good, but for their main lines, they are slight or sub-specialty or borderline specialty quality, but it's the volume they buy, it's the roast profile they roast to, because you've got to think they're like Pike Place or whatever their house is, right? That's got to stay essentially the same all year round every year, which is basically impossible. Like without changing coffees, without adjusting things, because they roast to a certain degree where your palate can't differentiate those changes because it's so darkly caramelized and roasted. Yeah. But they do have some really good practices, and it's actually influenced the specialty market quite a lot.
Yeah, so grassroots level, they're still doing good things. But at the mass consumer level, they're doing.
Yeah, on the finished product end, it's not great.
But I think at the same time, it kickstarted the specialty industry as well. Like
they made the cafe accessible, which you think before Starbucks in the UK specifically. You can't really, you know, it was like an independent, old school caf. That was it, really. You know, like this Americanized or European way of drinking coffee wasn't really present in the UK.
You know, if you go into a cafe and you see a machine behind at the counter, then can you already tell?
You're literally like, I can walk past the window and you're like, they're gonna do a decent job. Some brewers you may have not used before as well that are quite cool. There's a newer one that we've just started offering, which is called a Fellow Stag Dripper, right? Yeah, Stag Dripper, so it's similar to a Clita. It's got flat bottom rather than the 60 that's all cone.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is that you almost create almost like an espresso puck. That kind of idea, this flat bed of coffee that's really even. And then the big thing with this is really high flow rates. There's loads of little holes, so it flows through very quickly. And it's a very modern kind of way of brewing. This high flow rate brewing is very in right now because you can get quite high extractions and pull a lot out of the coffee without, and you know, grind much finer without the brew stalling. Whereas AeroPress, much more simplistic. Coffee goes in, you press it, and coffee comes out. It's like, but yeah, good old AeroPress. Can't really go too far wrong with it. I think the only downside for me is it's a bit of a murky brew sometimes. If you push too hard and plunge it, it gets a bit too dirty. It's more like a cafetiere, like, you know, it's like a clean cafetiere if you put it that way. But yeah, it's such a versatile brewer. Like people make faux espresso. You know, some people do. You know, obviously filter coffee, more like pour over kind of stuff with it. So I've got it set to like 95, just off boiling point really, to really get it going. Because a lot of our coffees are quite lightly roasted, so you kind of really want to push your extraction as far as you can by brewing hot. So this brewer, it's got a little funnel to put your grounds in so it doesn't get all over the sides of the paper, which is quite nice. I thought about that. And it slots in here to like a little holder as well, so after it's dripping you can just pop it on there so there's no drips going to your countertop and stuff like that. It's quite a nice little system. That's your cup or carafe then, so you can either drink directly from it or decant it, which is quite cool. But yeah, that Fellow brand are definitely like the design focused.
Oh, is it like a glass inside a glass?
Yeah, dual wall. So you touch it, it's cold, but the inside's hot. So it holds on to heat really well as well. It keeps it quite hot quite a while. Whereas, these are obviously single wall little decanters. Dial in a nice coffee, maybe Rocky Mountain for him.
We go 16,250.
16,250. Okay.
16,250. Full immersion.
Full immersion. Can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong. I think that's pretty standard filter territory.
Yeah, a little
coarser, so you
there.
might leave it bloom for a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's quite coarse.
Yeah.
You get quite a much cleaner cup that way with an AeroPress. If you got a little bit more coarse than you think. I suppose that's like coarse sea salt, isn't it? It's like, it's the best way to describe it, I suppose. But yeah, that's the issue with the AeroPress is if you go too fine, you suddenly get this really murky brew, and it's just not as good as it could be.
No, definitely. Better to go a little bit coarser.
Yeah.
Don't even throw that over your shoulder now, like salt. Or...
Yeah. If you go anywhere under 93, you're going to start losing out on extraction. Because your water's basically not that, well, it's hot, but it's not hot enough to really bring out all the good qualities and characteristics that are kind of hidden inside that coffee.
Yeah, the main difference between, like we said, this is a full immersion brewer, so the coffee and water are in contact the whole time. There's no need to like bloom it, like some people say. There's no wetting it and then wetting it again. There's no point in immersion brewing because you want the contact the whole time. Whereas on these types of brewers, it's all about refreshing the water because the water is a solvent, trying to pull out as much of the coffee's soluble parts as possible.
To kind of break the crust, agitate.
Yeah, this coffee probably would have been either roasted today or yesterday. It's just very
gassy.
fresh. You can see how gassy it is and how bubbly it is at the top.
I'm going to put the filter back on and then about 30-second plunge.
Yeah, nice.
Key with the AeroPress, as soon as you start to hear it spitting, that's when you stop, because that's all the air that's kind of left over inside the tube. And you don't really want to push that through, because all the water's come through. If you start pushing that through, you're going to start pushing through some taints and bitter characteristics of that coffee. But it's not the cleanest way of making filter coffee. Like, it's still got that kind of murkiness to it.
Yeah, compared to one of the brews we'd make on one of these now, the characteristics are so different. It's definitely more like body heavy and texture in the mouth rather than what we're going to brew in a sec, which is much more, I suppose, vibrant in its acidity and stuff like that. Well, you'd use this one because it's. And then let's go for a different coffee this time. So we'll go for that natural Brazil that you liked as well. So, big difference to this brew, we're going to end up having to go much finer just by the grind size, how much finer that is. It's more, you can imagine, right, every pour that we do is pretty much exiting the bed of coffee within a few seconds, so it's got to really increase that surface area to pull a bit more out of that coffee. It's a tough one. South Wales water, specifically down your way, and kind of where I'm from, is so bad for brewing coffee, tap water. So really you want some more minerals in there to pull more out of the coffee.
So how do the cafes make do them?
Yeah, so they have water treatment under every counter. Oh. So they have like cartridges that we install. We do 4 of them. So one that is meant for hard water areas, soft water areas. Hard water areas adding magnesium. Soft water areas adding magnesium. So magnesium, which this water that we're drinking right now is charged with essentially, because it binds onto the molecules in the coffee and really pulls out so much flavour, along with other minerals as well. But magnesium really makes it more vibrant and more kind of clear. Is the best way to describe it. At home, most people will just buy a bottle of Ashbeck from Tesco, because it's actually a really good water to brew coffee with, because it's slightly mineralised but not too crazy. So first thing's bloom. So if you want to come around actually and have a little look at the timer, and just because it's more evident in this type of filter brewing. So we're going to start off with our freshly boiled, just off the boiled water. We're going to then start the timer and then bloom 3 times the weight. So it's around 45 grams of what we put in. And then we're going to give that a good agitation and a good stir just to get some extraction going and just really make sure all the dry bits are now wet and degassing. You can also as well do a little wiggle to get it going. So we wait about 35 seconds or so. It really depends on how fresh the coffee is. I'm going to wait till about 40 just because it's very, very fresh. So I'm going to go in with another pour. I'm going to pour up to around 150-ish. And then give it another little wiggle just to catch everything off the sides. Leave that. Now we'll do another pulse in a moment. You can see this repeated pulsing of water is just refreshing that bed with fresh hot water. That's increasing the extraction then. 255 of water, which is a 1 to 17 ratio, so it's a slightly larger ratio than what we did with the AeroPress. Generally with pour over brewers, you will, succeed in good extractions if you run more water through it. Whereas full immersion brews tend to lend themselves to slightly shorter amounts of water, more like 1 to 15, 1 to 16 kind of thing. So we get some fresh bowls now, just so you can taste side by side. I know they're different coffees and stuff, but you can see just by the colour, right? So that's the AeroPress on the right, and that's the pour over there. Even though it was completely different, fine, you're getting much more sediment in the cup on the right, whereas it's much more clean and almost like a black tea before you put milk in it. It almost looks like that. It's slightly lighter in colour as well. That's not bad. Do you want a bit? No? Coffee down?
I'm done. Drank too much.
In terms of the texture, on the colder previous brew, on the AeroPress, it's different, isn't it? Like on the palate, you almost get a thicker, slightly silky kind of mouthfeel, whereas on the newer brew, it's more thin and a bit more like acidity driven. Yeah, so it's just like tailoring what you want out of a coffee, really. Like if you want something punchy in the morning, that's going to be easy to do. AeroPress is the way. Yeah. But generally speaking, the kind of in specialty settings, it's normally pour over brews because you have a really good, I suppose, bright, more acidity driven cup profile, which is quite in at the moment. People like that type of thing. But like these brews, did we send you one of these? Yeah. Yeah, so like that is really versatile because you can use it in that pour over way by opening the brewer the whole time, or doing essentially like similar to the AeroPress, like the pressing, full immersion, then draw down. And drop. But the really key thing with that is rather than you having high and dries on the side, really giving that a good stir or wiggle before drawing down. Otherwise you get almost this, you see it sometimes, they're like, just a cake kind of out, catching all those grounds. And you don't want that really at all.
And they pick up on anything. So if you see this one here, you can see they're kind of collected around the sides. Yeah. They're like the fines which will catch. But on the AeroPress, they always catch right at the bottom, all the way around. So those fines will give the coffee certain characteristics like body. So if you take the fines away, you lose a lot of body, a lot of the kind of texture. But then you can always take away a lot of the bitterness as well. Because fines, because they're so much smaller than the ground particles you want, they will extract a lot faster.
If you go into a cafe and you see a machine behind at the counter, then can you already tell?
You literally like, I can walk past the window and you're like, they're going to do a decent job.
But then at the same time, you can go in and you can have the best of the best, and if the barista hasn't got a clue, it's going to be terrible. Yeah.
And that's very common, man. Like from our end of things, we're nitpicking at everything, right, with coffee.
And that's why we're so big on training as well. Yeah. Just so our customers, we know that our customers are doing the best job with our coffee. We don't want to.
It's so important. Like they can literally go for a fancy mod bar, every grinder under the sun. There's the element of manual processing things still a little bit. There's a hand to be had in that process, so it's quite important. We're seeing more and more automation, so like a lot of weighing, a lot of multi-boiler machines, a lot of stuff to keep the consistency really high without high staff training. Even from like the automated bean to cup one touch stuff, they like calibrate themselves. They fully like will steam milk internally and dispense into a jug, so you just pour the latte out and serve. So the barista essentially is the plater. They're not the chef. They're plating it and on the pass. That's their part of playing it. So it's kind of.
And also, you know, if a cafe, for example, at peak times is very busy, if you need to speed up that process, or you know, if a human is going to make an error because they're having to speed up the process, because all of a sudden there's a group of 10 that have come in and they want, you know, they all want to be served at once or something, then, you know, that's part of the development, I suppose.
Yeah, I worked in a coffee shop where every Sunday morning, a group of 15 to 20 cyclists will come in and they would all order flat whites at the same time.
Bloody cyclists.
And you know, they come in and it'll be two of us on tail end on bar, so we'll have to smash them out as fast as we can while serving other customers.
Yeah.
Having at the time we had to kind of weigh out every single shot. Didn't have like grind by weight grinders or anything like that. It's just a standard setup, you know.
It's like
because you don't want to sacrifice that quality, but also the customer is like, come on, where's my drink?
It's a balance to it. I think that's a battle every new cafe, you know, we work with faces, like big or small. It's balancing speed of service with customer expectation and stuff like that, because people kind of expect when they go into a specialty kind of indie cafe, they probably are going to be waiting a little bit longer for a drink, takeaway or not, because it's the nature of their perception of that type of cafe, right? They're taking their time with things. It's a McDonald's advert effect kind of thing, you know. It's that kind of, you know, quality should take a little bit longer, really. Obviously their story is the opposite of that, but like they're kind of really played on that stereotype of the specialty cafe taking ages and being too sensory focused for people. There's so much care and attention that goes into making that product as it is.
Yeah.
Like when you go to Origin and you see producers hand picking stuff or mechanically picking stuff, and it takes them years to grow a plant, years to make sure it tastes good, you know, and then, you know, harvest, prune the plants, harvest, look after it, and then dry it, prep for export, get it to a country, a roaster then roasts it to a certain degree or whatever they're doing with it. Up until that point, it's been so much so much has been.
There's literally generations of expertise going into it.
Yeah, and then people are like, oh, well, I've got to pay 10p more for my flat white. You know, it's like stuff like that. It's just, it blows your mind when you think about it. How much, like, really, coffee is way too cheap as it is right now. Way too cheap. It should be 4 times the price of something ridiculous if we're really trying to be. You know, it's just
like
such a commodity, isn't it?
See specialty coffee should be the same as, like, treated the same and have the same respect as like fine wines.
Well, I mean, coming here today has definitely given me a bigger appreciation of, like, the, as you just said a couple of minutes ago, you know, from Origin, the people obviously going through the process, taking years to do it, blah blah blah, and then it gets here, and then it still goes through another process. It's like da, 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 and then it goes to a cafe, and then there's the process of, like, that barista then serving it to you, and then you sit down, you drink it, and it's been through, like, so much just to get to
that.